Now, I am officially in fanboy mode as I welcome our next guest to the show this week. But before I introduce him, we have to go back 20 years to September 22nd, to be exact, when Oceanic Flight 815 crashed on a mysterious island somewhere in the South Pacific Ocean. Characters such as Hurley, Sawyer, Jack, John Locke, and Kate, just to name a few, were embraced to our screens, and they were introduced to us for the first time ever. From then on, we ploughed hours of viewing, 91 to be exact, glued to our TVs, trying to figure out the mysteries of the island, such as why there were polar bears on the island, who the others were, who or what was down the hatch, and if they would ever make it off the island. If you don't know what I'm talking about, this was the series Lost, which, of course, if you haven't figured yet, I was a huge fan of. Now to the point, this week's guest celebrates the remarkable 20th year anniversary with a documentary called Getting Lost, and is here to talk to us all about it. It's director Taylor Morden. Thank you for that, for joining me, Taylor. It's been an absolute pleasure to get you on, but welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. I'm happy to be here.
I mean, as you can tell, very long-winded intro, big fanboy of the series. I can imagine you probably were a fanboy or are a fanboy of the series. So tell us a bit about why you chose to create this absolute beauty and what made you decide to create Getting Lost.
Yeah, I was a fan of the show, starting back in 2004. I didn't watch it from the beginning, but everybody around me was saying, you got to check out this show. You got to check out this show. Um, and I was like, whatever. Because TV, I was into movies. I didn't like TV. I liked, big spectacle and cinematic things. And then by the time I finally watched it, I was like, oh my gosh, this is a movie. It's a movie every week, and it's an amazing show, and I was hooked. From I caught up on season one on DVD, and then every season after that, I watched season two live, and then between season two and three, I watched seasons one and two again. And so by the time the sixth season came out, I had watched the first season six times. But I loved the show. And then years later, I started making documentary films. I've made five at this point, and it was always in the back of my mind, that thing about Lost, that sort of fan community and everybody on the internet trying to solve these mysteries together and getting together, and the podcasts and the message boards, and the fact that the showrunners did a podcast, the fact that it was this huge thing at Comic-Con and all this stuff. It was so unique. It was such a specific thing about this show that had never happened before, and really hasn't happened since, because then we got streaming, and TV is so all over the place now. That I always thought that was such a unique moment in television history that would make a great documentary. And I've been saying that for over 10 years, but it was too soon. People were still mad about the finale. People still didn't want to talk about Lost yet. And so I had it in my head for 10 years almost. 2024 is the 20th anniversary of the crash of Oceanic Flight 815. As you know, that's when I want to have this documentary done. So about 3 years ago, I reached out to my friend and producer, Ralph, and we started the process because we thought, okay, it'll take us about 3 years to make this documentary. And we just barely got it done. We had our LA premiere on September 22nd, which is the actual 20th anniversary. And I was still working on the movie on September 21st. So we just barely did it. But that's sort of a long-winded answer to a simple question of just, I'm a big fan and I like to tell stories, and Lost was a big part of my life, and I know it was a big part of a lot of people's lives. And that's the story.
It did set the bar really high for television programs, didn't it? And I think it sort of then made everybody else aware that actually they're making film quality series now. We need to step up the game. And it did, and that helped elevate a lot of series sort of after that. It also was huge back in the day, as we've mentioned. It took over many people's lives. It was Emmy Award winning. It soon became the number one most talked about show. I was in school around the time it was out, so it was a big part of my conversations at school. Obviously, the show is still widely available for those that haven't seen it or want to rewatch it. But how does the documentary bring it all together? And does it answer any of the questions that were left unanswered in the series?
It depends on what kind of questions you had. We don't have any new big, gotcha revelations about, oh, actually, the island was this, or actually, they were dead the whole time. It's it's not that kind of documentary. It's about the impact the show had on people's lives and on the television landscape. And so in that way, there are things probably that people don't know, or there's certainly stories in there that have never been told before, but we're not going through, episode by episode, and this is what this meant, and this is what that meant. Because, there's 100 videos on YouTube right now that do that. There's people have been breaking down Lost for 20 years, and it's probably the most documented show of all time. We had one of our interviewees was like, no offense to your documentary, but it's been done, right? So that's why we wanted to come at it from a different angle. And yeah, if you want a detailed explanation of a theory about why, the bottle of McCutcheon's whiskey was in this office and then it was in that room and that whatever, that's all online already. Lostpedia has so much information. It's a wealth. And there's 1,000 podcasts and there's 1,000 YouTube videos. This is a documentary that is sort of a holistic story of, how Lost came to be, what it became, and what it meant to people, and how we interacted with that show, and how special and unique that time was. Um, and so in that way, yeah, there's new information, but it's not. Don't go into it expecting to find out who was in the second outrigger. We're not going to tell you.
I saw a live Q&A you did with producer, is it Ralph D. Apple? Am I saying that right?
Apple, yeah.
Apple, and he started getting quite emotional after you dropped the trailer for the documentary. Had any of you anticipated how big this was going to be, and whether you'd get any of the cast and crew to actually come on board with it?
Yeah, we had no idea. I'm just an indie filmmaker, right? We do documentaries. I live in Oregon, which is, for all intents and purposes, the opposite side of America from LA, right? I'm not in Hollywood. We don't do it the studio way. And so we set out just to tell the story of the fan base of Lost, and we knew Ralph has been a part of that community for 20 years. He did a podcast, back in 2005 about Lost. That's how we met. And so I knew we would have access to the fan community, and maybe we'd get in touch with one or two of the cast, right? Because that would be neat. And wouldn't the fans love to see how Hurley's doing now? So that was our plan. And then we started doing it, and we started telling people about it, and the word started to get out. And all of a sudden, more and more of the cast came on board. And then Damon and Carlton were on board. And then J.J. Abrams hops on board. And all of a sudden, it's like the Lost documentary. And that's not what we set out to do. That was just, it was mind blowing for us because we're fans, right? So we went from telling the story of the fan base and interviewing like side characters, like Frogurt and Arzt, and like they're great, awesome people, and we loved interviewing them. But we never in a million years thought we'd be sitting in a room with Evangeline Lilly talking about filming the pilot of Lost. That blew my mind. And so now we have this movie that really is the definitive look back at this show. Uh, and it kind of surprised us too.
It created stars as well, didn't it, out of some of the cast? I mean, obviously they had been actors and actresses beforehand, but this made huge stars out of the main characters in the series. I would have been in absolute starstruck meeting the cast, but who was your favorite person to interview for the documentary?
It was really hard to play favorites, but I like to answer this one with Larry Fong, the DP of Lost of the first season. Um, is a great guy, fantastic cinematographer, went on to do tons of huge movies. Uh, but his interview was one of my favorites because he did magic tricks for us. So he's a magician. And we sat down to do the interview, and he's making stuff disappear and doing card tricks and stuff like that. And I've never had an interview like that before. Uh, but I mean, realistically, who's not going to freak out when Josh Holloway walks into the room wearing a cowboy hat, looking like Sawyer? Stuff like that is just, or when Terry O'Quinn says to me, "Hey, reach over there on that shelf," and it's his knife from the show, and he's like, "Hand me that knife. Let me tell you a story." That kind of thing is just surreal as a fan of the show. Like couldn't have imagined some of these conversations we were going to be able to have.
I bet. I bet. I would have just been absolutely speechless, to be honest. I would have been in absolute meltdown mode. You're heading to Hawaii, a film festival, international film festival, in just a few days of us recording this interview, which is quite fitting, seeing though it was filmed over in Hawaii. I can see how you've done that. But good news for fans of the series is that you're heading over to the UK for a premiere on November 2nd. So, how can listeners, fans, grab hold of tickets for this?
Yeah, we're really excited to be coming over to London to show this movie in a theater, in a beautiful old theater, the Phoenix Cinema. The tickets are up at our website, gettinglostdoc.com. And there's links to all of our screenings. It's all over the world, but London is especially exciting for us. We know the show was a big deal there, and we actually interviewed some people from London, some fans that um, didn't make it into the doc, but we're going to show that DVD extra in the cinema there, just as a way to thank the London fans. But it's very excited. I'm really excited we get to be there and do a live Q&A about the doc right after. So you'll get to see it, and then you can ask me anything.
Fantastic. And I can tell you, I don't know what the weather's like in Hawaii at the moment, but you might need a coat when you come over to the UK.
Might be a little different. Well, I live in the Pacific Northwest, so it rains here from September through April, so I'm used to it.
After the screening, then, what do you hope or plan will happen next with the documentary?
We're working on figuring out where it's going to be available digitally. We're trying to get that done by the end of the year. So hopefully, wherever you rent or stream or buy digital movies, it should be available. We're hoping in December. So just keep an eye out. We're on social media everywhere at Getting Lost Doc, gettinglostdoc.com. That'll have the information once we have it, but no specific release date and no specific platforms yet. We're hoping to have that announcement soon.
Fantastic. Listen, I can honestly say it's been a pleasure talking to you this morning. Thank you for taking the time to chat with me. All the best with the screenings and festivals. I know it's going to be a success. I can't wait personally to come and hopefully watch it in London. But Taylor, it's been a pleasure. Enjoy Hawaii, enjoy the screenings, and yeah, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you.